Hey friends, Pastor Bill Walden here with Build Up the Church. That's my teaching ministry apart from my pastoral ministry. My main gig these days is teaching at Cornerstone Fellowship in Napa. But my other side ministry, one of my extended ministries is to speak at Bible colleges and also in conferences. So you can see my sermon notes there on buildupthechurch.com, and you can follow along if you'd like. So we are finishing now the book of Colossians. We are in Colossians chapter 4, and we remember that the Apostle Paul is writing from a prison in Rome, and he's been imprisoned not for breaking any kind of laws, but because he was preaching the gospel, and a lot of people didn't like that. And so we read here as he's closing out the letter of Colossians, we pick it up in chapter 4, verse 16. Now, when this epistle is read among you, when this letter is read among you, see that it is read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and that you likewise read the epistle from Laodicea. The word epistle is another word for letter. So he's just saying, hey, listen, when this letter is read among you, make sure the Laodiceans read it. And by the way, I wrote them a letter too. Make sure you read that. And commentators have a hunch that the letter to the Laodiceans is actually the book of Ephesians. And so no conclusive proof on that. That's just extra credit for you. So he's writing to a lot of people, and he's saying, pass this letter around. And then he includes something rather personal, which almost could seem awkward and uncomfortable. But he says, and say to Archippus. Now he's calling out Archippus in front of all of these people. And he says, say to Archippus, you guys tell him, take heed to the ministry which you have received in the Lord, that you may fulfill it. Archippus seemed to be, just from what we can gather from this brief statement here, it seems as though he understood that he had a special calling from God, perhaps the pastoral calling, and yet he needed to be kind of encouraged and called out of hibernation, encouraged to get up off of the couch. And hey, get to it, Archippus. You have this calling. You know you have this calling. And it's very interesting that Paul didn't just do it privately, but he said, I want all of you to tell him too, which would indicate to me that they also recognized that there was a calling on Archippus's life. And so a vote of confidence, but also a nudge, a loving poke in the ribs. Hey man, come on, get to it. You know, you've got this calling. We need you to fulfill this calling, especially if it was a pastoral calling. Hey, the church needs you. So get plugged in, and whatever's been keeping you from doing it, if it's been insecurity or fear or busyness or whatever else it is, hey, put those things aside and get to it. So, hey, let me read to you, if I may, from the New Living Translation. It says, after you have read this letter, pass it on to the church at Laodicea, so they can read it too, and you should read the letter I wrote to them. So once again, very, very broad distribution of these letters, and then very broad distribution of this encouragement to Archippus. And say to Archippus, be sure to carry out the ministry the Lord gave you. Hey man, come on, get going. And so it made me think of a few people. I'm not going to call them out here on this video on YouTube or on social media, but it made me think of a few people that I believe have a real special calling on their life. And I have my little quail hair here. Let me get that thing down. There we go. It was bugging me. It made me think of a few people that I know that I think have a tremendous calling on their life, very gifted, and they hear from a lot of people that, hey man, you've got this gift. And some people that I think of that have that pastoral calling, and to me, I'm not their Lord, obviously, so I don't set their calendar, I don't set their schedule, but inside of my heart I'm thinking, what are you waiting for? You've got what it takes. You have a sense that you've got what it takes. You have a sense that you've been called. And so once again, I'm not the judge of their response time, but I kind of understand this emotion of when you see somebody that God can really use, and a lot of people can see it, and that person even has an understanding and a sense of, God's called me to this. At some point, I'm just going to let the quail thing go free, shall I? At some point, you just got to pull the trigger, man. Get up off the couch and go for it. Don't be napping, and don't be getting into your head too much. Just have faith that God's called you. He's begun a good work in you. He'll complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. Paul says to the Philippians in chapter 2, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Come on, Archippus, work it out. God's worked it in, now you work it out. Paul goes on to say, for it's God who's working in you, energetically, energeo in the Greek. God's energetically working in you to cause you to both will and to do, to want and perform according to his good pleasure. So, man, when God's called you and he's given you that desire and other people see it and other people are urging you on, for an Archippus, they might be talking, when he's not in the room. Man, we sure wish that guy would go for it. Paul's saying, hey, when he gets in the room, encourage him to his face. Provoke him to his face in a godly way. Tell him to go for it. So if your nickname happens to be Archippus, hey man, go for it. So some things to think about. Thanks for watching.